Hello, I want to welcome everybody to the Tax Amazon community meeting. We're here to participate in what will be the final Tax Amazon vote. So obviously today is a day of celebration, or we expect it to be. But at the same time, we've been in this movement, and I know many of you have been fighting to tax Amazon now for months, in reality, a couple of years. So we're not counting on anything until the final votes are cast. So we're here to, of course, have a community meeting, listen from a lot of the activists or some of the activists who have participated in this movement. We've got a really exciting agenda to continue to pressure City Council to make it clear that they know that our movement is watching. We're not taking anything for granted. And that we're going to bring the message that we've gotten thousands of signatures in support of taxing Amazon. We've had hundreds and actually thousands of activists participating day in, day out for weeks, months, even years now, and that we're going to continue keeping the pressure up. We also are acutely aware that even when we do win an Amazon tax, we need to make abundantly clear who won this tax and how it was won. So to that end, we'll have a really dynamic community meeting. We're going to hear, of course, from Councilmember Kshama Sawant, whose legislation and whose leadership throughout this has made in part this tax Amazon vote possible, together, of course, with the movement. We're going to also hear from some of the community leaders, as I mentioned. Reverend Angela Ying, Senior Pastor at Bethany United Church of Christ. Sharon Crowley, a rank and file activist from the UAW 4121 Union. Reverend Robert Jeffrey, a senior pastor in the Central District at New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, and Logan Swan, a rank and file ironworker, member of Socialist Alternative. So we'll get to that agenda shortly, but of course, we know that a lot of people have already signed up, have gone through these community meetings, but that there's also likely some new people who may not yet have learned how to sign up for public comment. So as always, we want to real briefly have Nick Jones, community organizer in Councilmember Kshama Sawant's office, walk us through that. And again, I want to welcome and thank everybody on behalf of Councilmember Kshama Sawant. My name is Adam Zimkowski. I'm an organizer in Kshama Sawant's office. And without further ado, let's hear from Nick how we can sign up for public comment, then hear from Councilmember Kshama Sawant.
Thank you, Adam. Here we go, 1 second. Yeah, so definitely folks should still sign up for public comment. Every time folks sign up, it helps create extra momentum and pressure on the council. You'll need to get to this web page to be able to sign up. It's pretty easy to get to. I always just, whatever search bar you're using, I just type in Seattle Public Comment. It should come up pretty much at the top, most likely. It should be the seattle.gov URL. You just click there, and it should take you to that page. You'll want, this is just some information, but you want to scroll down and fill out this form in its entirety. And it's really important, folks, put in your email, that whatever email address you use, that's where they'll send an email with information about calling in to give the public comment. And it's important you use, like put in whatever phone, like your phone number. They'll use your phone number to identify you on the stack when they're going through public comment. So definitely fill that all out. You'll check this, and then you'll, put in a gender item you're addressing. You can just say something like pass the Amazon tax, and then just hit submit. You should get an email and get on the list to be able to get on public comment. Even if you're not able to speak, it'll still register that hundreds of folks have signed up to tell the city council we need to pass the Amazon tax with no delays. So that's it. Folks should do that right now if you haven't already. And I'm going to throw it back to Adam.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nick, for that brief instruction. And yeah, without further ado, why don't we move on to Councilmember Kshama Sawant? We've got a lot to talk about this upcoming meeting. So Councilmember Sawant, could you provide some of the political context and some instruction on how we can most effectively pressure City Council, continue to pressure until that tax Amazon vote is final?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this community meeting, which is the preface for what we believe, unless any council members have some betrayals in store. What we believe is going to be a truly historic meeting of the City Council where our movement's Amazon tax will be passed. After years of viciously attacking the idea of taxing big business and the people who were fighting for the tax on big business, conservative Seattle Times commentator Danny Westneat recently, just a few days ago after our Wednesday committee, praised the Democratic Party establishment for the Amazon tax that was passed out of the committee and that's about to be passed today. His praise is based on a complete fabrication from start to finish. It's based on this mythical idea of quote unquote savvy by the Democratic establishment politicians who, unlike our movement, is willing to negotiate with big business. And it's also a fabrication because his narrative relies on recycling the lie that our movement's Amazon tax is a tax on jobs, which we know it's not. But this is an important example, and the reason I'm quoting this is precisely to emphasize the point that Adam just made, which is that when we fight for something just in this deeply unjust society under capitalism, our experience educates us. We might start out by thinking that, well, this is such a reasonable and moderate and even mild demand we're making. $15 an hour is not enough, but it will be a major progress for working people. This tax is a very modest tax. It's not enough, but it will make a huge difference in building affordable housing and addressing homelessness and racist gentrification. Surely the elite will agree with us that these small measures are needed and they'll join us. But the process of fighting for something that we want and need in our society itself demonstrates that this is not going to be some sort of polite discussion with big business, that it is indeed going to be a fight. So when we use the word fight, we don't use it just to make some sort of dramatic impact in our vocabulary. We use it because it actually describes how nothing that we win is given to us because it's a good idea or because it's social justice. We win it when we actually fight for it and we are able to change the balance of forces away from the big business elite for a moment and towards working people. Obviously, this is going to be, in order to actually win the real kind of society that we need, this is hardly enough. This is only the beginning. But the reason I'm sharing this story about this Seattle Times conservative columnist is because it's an example of how first the ruling class attacks you, and then they attack you again. And then your movement is strong enough to force the ruling class to concede. And then when they're forced to concede, they say it was their idea all along, or one of their people did it, and it was clever negotiations, not the movement, and the movement does not play much of a role. Or if it did, it was just some sort of left flank, and really the establishment made it happen. I think that is extremely crucial for us, not only that we have come this far in fighting for and almost now on the threshold of winning a historic victory, but in order for us to draw the right lessons and win further victories, if we are going to build on today's victory and not stop here, which I know we all agree on, then part of the battle we have to fight is for the narrative of how it was won, and to make sure that we use every opportunity that we have to spread the truth, which is that it is when working people get organized together and rely on their own forces and do not get fooled by the establishment, then we can win. And the reason this is important right now at this community meeting is that I hope that our public testimony collectively will claim victory for the movement, and that in our public comment we say very clearly, no, any victory we win on the Amazon tax today will not be because of any savvy of any particular politician. It is entirely because of our movement led by workers and socialists, unions, workers who are non-unionized and are fighting for unions, Democratic Party rank and file and legislative district activists, environmental organizations like 350 Seattle and Transit Riders Union. We have the faith community and many faith leaders and organizers, And together, what have we accomplished? We built a democratic campaign that fought through action conferences where we discussed and debated on and voted on our proposals. And together, we have collected now, which are now 30,000 ballot petition signatures. And it is those stacks of ballot petitions that represent the real threat to big business. And when you look at those stacks, if it doesn't move you, then I don't know what will, because those stacks of petitions, they represent the blood, sweat, and tears that thousands of people in this campaign have given, because we all agree that having regressive taxes is absolutely not acceptable. And especially as the city goes into a recessionary period where the establishment is putting budget cuts on us, that we have to go on an offensive and win a completely different, a 180-degree different thing than budget cuts, which is taxing big business. And that's what we have been able to do, and we have come this far. If my staff can share the 2 slides that we have, it just summarizes these points. And I just want to make sure that it's helpful to all of us in our public comment, because we're not just talking to the city council members in our public comment, as I've said before, and I hope everybody will keep this in mind, that when each of us speaks publicly, we are not just speaking to the powers that be. Yes, our message is to them partly. We want to make sure they hear from us loud and clear. We are not accepting any watering down of this legislation that we have worked so hard for, fought hard for, and we are about to win. So we demand that today what gets passed is not watered down any further from what was passed on the budget committee on Wednesday. That's absolutely something we are demanding, and it is a message to the city council. We don't want a sunset clause. Our movement succeeded in defeating the sunset clause. This is absolutely crucial that we won this victory. We want to make sure that there is no sunset clause inserted back into the legislation today. We want to make sure that the amount that is raised per year is not watered down. So basically, we want the tax either strengthened or to be voted on as is. But in addition to speaking to the council members and warning them about the message of our movement, when each of us speaks in public comment, we are also speaking to our fellow activists, to working people who may not be actively involved, but maybe inspired by the work that we have all collectively done, and maybe wanting to be part of it. So our message is also for them, to make sure that they feel empowered to join us, because our fight is hardly done. It's only begun. So just a few notes on the public comment. Let's make sure everybody remembers that it is a 1-minute public comment. Very likely, I don't expect that they would go for 2 minutes. So it's best if we all prepare for 50 seconds of comment, and then that gives you a little bit of buffer to make sure you finish your comment before it cuts you off. It's always best to finish our comment before the timer runs out and the phone line is cut off. And the most important thing we need to do through this public comment is claim victory for the thousands of people who have fought on the front lines of this struggle. In other words, what has got us here is not the so-called savvy that corporate media tells us about establishment politicians, but it is the thousands of people who have fought for this, and especially laying stress on the 30,000 ballot initiative petitions, because that's what's causing the fear in the establishment, and they are being forced to concede. And in the next slide we'll show this as well, that this is what the ruling class fears, a movement that is fighting in solidarity. And I want to make sure everybody also hears loud and clear. It is no coincidence that the reason we were able to collect these thousands of petitions is because of the movement that is ongoing nationwide, the uprising, because working people are understanding that the same system that gives rise to police violence that especially brutally targets our Black and brown community members is also that system that targets them for poverty. And the fact that we have such deep inequality in our society means that we have to band together, working people of all races. We have to band together, and regardless of who we are as working people, regardless of where we come from, immigrants like me are part of this movement. We say no to racism, no to police violence, and no to economic exploitation. And if you look at the whole spectrum of the struggles that we face, the struggles that we face as working people as a whole, but that specifically targets our communities of color. This solidarity is so crucial because we have to together have a stake in a society that is free of racism, free of gentrification, a city, building a city that is affordable for all people. And that's why a final but a very important message that we should bring in our public testimony also is how we can take the lessons of the struggle to win our future demands, which are coming up in the near future, not in the distant future. We absolutely want to fight to demand that the city council defund the police by at least 50%, as the community has raised, but not in the distant future, as I said, but right now, this month, next month, so that there's no delays. We want to make sure that all the protesters, the courageous people who have been fighting in the Black Lives Matter movement, that they're all released without charges. We don't want the movement to be targeted. The police are causing the violence, not the movement. We want to stop the sweeps of our homeless neighbors and instead have a massive funds for tiny house villages, which have proven themselves as a conduit for real dignity and life for our homeless neighbors, and helps them get situated in affordable housing as well. And we want to ensure that at least 1,000 quality homes are made available for Black working class people in the Central District, because this is a part of this entire movement that is fighting against racist gentrification, and other speakers will be speaking to it as well. So I'll stop there. But just to say, this is incredible. Let's make sure we are coming back for our action conference and victory party that will be announced later by the Tax Amazon movement. But let me take this opportunity to thank everybody who fought for this. Even if you collected one signature, let alone those of you who collected hundreds or thousands of signatures, even if you did one shift, this victory belongs to you. This victory belongs to all the working people and the small business owners and other community members, including faith leaders who threw themselves into this fight. It belongs to all the organizations that have helped lead this struggle. That is the Transit Riders Union, 350 Seattle, many of the progressive labor unions, including UAW 4121, who will be joining us today in this community meeting. And I'm sure I'm leaving out many organizations, but I specifically also want to thank all the socialists who have fought alongside us, including the members of Socialist Alternative, who I know have been part of the backbone of collecting the signatures. So this victory belongs to all of us. And let's make sure that the narrative of how this victory was won also belongs to us, so that we will continue empowering tens of thousands of working people like us, and that we build democratic campaigns just like we did with the Tax Amazon, where we all had a vote on how we would fight for this and what the policy proposals would look like. And make sure also to thank organizations like Share, Wheel, Nicholsville, and Lehigh, who have all fought for the rights of homeless neighbors for years and have been a consistent part of really advocating for a more just city. So I'll stop there, and solidarity, and thank you, everyone.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Shama. Yeah, and it really is just to hear the different organizations mentioned, the work that we've been doing for so long. Yeah, we should take a moment to just grasp that, we're on the verge as a movement, just a bunch of rank and file ordinary people of winning a tax on the biggest, most powerful businesses, not just in the city, in reality, the world, of more than $200 million per year. And this is over and above opposition on many levels that we've seen over and over, and we've been able to overcome over and over. And I've noted, through the years and the struggles that we've been engaged in, working people have this kind of inherent understanding that it's no individual that wins things, that it's collectively that we win things. Oftentimes this can imbue us with a certain humility, which is good. But in terms of which class fought for and won this struggle, this Tax Amazon victory, now is not the time for humility. We need to shout from the rooftops that it was our movement that won this, that it was not Democratic establishment politicians or some savvy backroom negotiations with well-meaning business, big business representatives. It was our movement that won it. Speaking of hard-fought, victory and the individuals that make that up, I'd like to introduce our first community speaker, probably nobody, very few, if anybody, can, has fought harder, sacrificed more evenings, more weekends, more energy than Reverend Angela Ying, senior pastor at Bethany United, who also at the same time just has inspired. So I'd like to hand it over to Reverend Angela Ying to talk about the work that we've been doing as a movement and how we can, of course, not let up, continue to pressure City Council to make sure this victory is passed and to make sure the narrative about who won this and how we won it is clear. So Reverend Angela, please take it from here.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to see you. And yes, it's really important. I see Reverend Jeffrey and others. It's just really important for all of us to realize that this is our story. This is your story. This is our story. This is your vision. This is our vision. This is your victory. This is our victory. And the key piece is that one of the things I just want to share with you is when we started way back to figure out this vision, it was really important. I said my day off was Monday and Saturday, and the 2 days I would give to Tax Amazon were Monday and Saturday and a whole bunch of evenings. But that's because of you. I have to thank you. I want to thank Council Member Kshama Sawant. I want to thank her staff. I want to thank all of the faith leaders, including my brother, Reverend Dr. Jeffrey. I want to thank all of you people because you inspire me. I mean, I know you say I inspire you, but the truth is you inspire me. And that is because it's all of us together. It's working people. It's people that are willing to struggle and put our time and our money and our lives on the line so that we can do something for the most vulnerable, okay? And the thing that's so wonderful is that we realize that, and I know I need to share this with you. I'm the first, and I say this, with humility, but with grace. I'm the very first Taiwanese American ordained in the United States of America, okay? I'm the very first second generation Taiwanese American, man or women, ordained in the United States of America. And I'm telling you, just like Reverend Jeffrey will say, when you're the first, you get beaten up in 1,000 different ways, and everyone will try to claim that they took something of what you did, okay? But the thing is that you did it, okay? I want to say, you were the first to come up with this vision to tax Amazon. You were. Now, others may claim it, but it's always hard to be first. Okay, and the fact that you, the people, were first is the reason why we're winning, the reason why we continue to fight, the reason why we need to get, and I'm working with Reverend Jeffrey and 2,200 faith leaders to get affordable housing beginning in the Central District because we know how important it is to stop the gentrification that's happening. Okay, our work is not done, but hey, you started the vision, you will complete the vision. Don't let anyone take away the vision from you because you were first. You were first, you will be last, and you will make it happen. Okay, so thank you for inspiring me. Continue to make sure there are no delays, to make sure that we have 30,000 ballot initiative petitions. I mean, we worked in the rain, we worked in the storm, we worked when there was protests, we worked when there were peace, protesters, we worked with anyone and everyone. All right, so you need to celebrate that. That is you, that is us, and I'm so grateful for you. All of you. And as Kshama and others have said, we can do this. We have done this. Don't let anyone take away your story. This is your story. This is our story. Thank you. And let's keep fighting because when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. Peace be with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Reverend. Always good to hear your words, especially 30 minutes before we speak, truth to power at the City Council. And it is, of course, it is the movement and all of our victory here today. Of course, assuming that we are able to push it through this final vote. And it's also important to recognize the difference between a City Council office that operates the way that Councilmember Kshama Sawant's office does as a representative of the movement inside City Hall, opening up those doors to City Hall, creating the space, and then of course, having those political discussions day in, day out with the movement in order to craft the most powerful movement around the biggest possible legislation that our movement is capable of winning at this time. And a big part of this, using the movement inside City Hall in the boldest possible way has been working with some of those progressive unions like UAW 4121, who, not just on the Amazon tax, but on other critical issues like rent control, given that so many of their members have been just crushed by the skyrocketing rents, and especially in the weeks and months to come around the question of a budget that makes working people pay coronavirus crisis and all the crisis of capitalism we're seeing, or one that puts the burden on big business and on the SPD, on taking away from the SPD's budget to fund community investments. UAW 4121 has played a critical role in these fights, and especially in this fight to tax Amazon. So let's go ahead and hear from Sharon Crowley, who's a rank and file activist from UAW 4121, who's been so active in this tax Amazon movement. So take it from here, Sharon.
Thank you, Adam, so much. And thank you, Reverend Ying. Your words are always inspiring for all of us. So yeah, just to reiterate, my union, I'm an organizer and a member of UAW Local 4121. We, as a union, continue to support the legislation that Kshama Sawant and Tammy Morales introduced to tax Amazon and other big businesses to fund social housing, the Green New Deal, and good union jobs programs. We have been encouraging the City Council to pass this legislation. We continue to encourage them to do that, despite the strong opposition we know they will get from the corporations that will be subject to the tax. We've also been working hard along with all of you. It has to be emphasized. This has been a huge collective effort, and I think we should be very, very proud of what we've accomplished. So we've been working hard along with all of you to get the Tax Amazon initiative onto the ballot next fall. Past experience shows that we can't count on the City Council to stick to their professed progressive principles when they're faced with opposition from powerful corporations and individuals who have really deep pockets and seek to buy influence and power in government. The Sawant-Morales legislation remains the most substantive proposal to address our city's overlapping crises of climate change, a scarcity of affordable housing, and now the public health emergency of COVID-19. But make no mistake, we won a huge victory last week. The Budget Committee passed an Amazon tax out of committee. And we're here today because the full council will be voting on this bill. So it's important for us to understand that we've won one victory in a series of victories that we need to keep pushing for. This victory does represent a clear shift in Seattle City political debate toward progressive revenue and toward meeting our city's pressing need for affordable housing. It's clear that our movement, especially the 30,000 plus signatures we have gathered in just a few weeks, has paved the way for this measure. Let's be very, very clear about that. Without this huge showing of support from the working people of Seattle, this bill would not be poised for passage today. We also won a huge victory with some of the amendments that were passed last week. We got rid of the sunset clause. It raises more money. This is clear evidence that the work we've been doing together has been effective. We need to keep fighting. This is a continuing message. We need to keep the pressure on to ensure that the council passes this legislation without reintroducing a sunset clause and without reducing the revenue it will raise. Make no mistake, again, as others have said and others will say today, this is our victory. The fact that we're even talking about progressive revenue and that we're now poised to pass this Amazon tax now and into the future means or shows our strength, the strength of our movement. We, the people of Seattle who have added our names and signatures to the Tax Amazon ballot initiative, are saying no to austerity. Austerity doesn't work for working people. We have to keep exerting this pressure, to keep repeating this message, supported by our strength, our solidarity, and our passion for these issues, for making the city more equitable and inclusive for all. The only way to keep saying no is to say yes to progressive revenue, and the best way to do that is by getting this Amazon tax passed. That way, that's the only way we'll be able to create the real solutions that we need to make our city more equitable and inclusive for all. It's time to tax Amazon. It's time to tax big business. It's time to make Seattle a city that works for all of us. Let's keep fighting. We can do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sharon. We're of course fighting today to tax Amazon to seal that final victory for more than $200 million per year to build social housing to address other urgent needs. And I really agree with what you said, that this is just one victory that we're hoping to win today in a series of victories. And that is, it's really true. And our next speaker we're going to hear from has been a part of a lot of these victories over the last several decades in reality. But I'd also like, before we go to Reverend Jeffrey, just note that we're also not just trying to win this victory today and call it goods. We hope, like the other victories that our movement has been able to win, 15 is the obvious example. We hope that this tax Amazon victory then spreads to other cities throughout the country, and that this example of big business paying the cost of the housing crisis, of the coronavirus crisis, be the example and the norm, and not putting the burden on working people, which is of course what the Democratic establishment and what politicians all across the country are hoping to do. So let's go ahead and hear from Reverend Robert Jeffrey, who is the senior pastor at New Hope Missionary Baptist. As I've said, he's been involved in a lot of struggles over many years, but his leadership in this tax Amazon movement, and in particular in the continuing struggle to ensure that 1,000 permanently affordable homes gets built first in the Central District, where gentrification and just the racist history of capitalist housing in the city has been most horrifically demonstrated. Just continuing that struggle. Let's hear from Reverend Robert Jeffrey about this tax Amazon struggle and the fight to 1,000 homes, build 1,000 homes in the CD.
Thanks. Thanks, Nick. And I just want to congratulate Councilwoman Sawant and all of her team. I think that she is a heroine of our community and of our state. And she has fought alone many times and taken undue criticism many times, and has been misunderstood by people she was trying to assist and help. She has my undying support and admiration. I and her staff, all of you guys are just doing a tremendous job, and co-opting the successes of the struggle is a fine art adopted by the ruling class. They know how to co-opt. They know how to save their necks and save themselves and save their own self-interest by looking like they're winning a victory when it's really them yielding ground. And I think that all of those who've been in this movement for a long time understand that. We understand that they don't want to give credit to the hardworking organizers. They don't want to give credit to people who have been voicing direction and future and giving vision where there is no vision. So they co-opt it. But we have to be vigilant in that, and I as one will be, and along with all those that I know. Also, we want to applaud this victory and hope that it will go through, and hope that the council will vote. And we are adamant about keeping the heat on and keeping the faith and keeping working, because this is only the beginning. I mean, we still need housing in the central area. We still need to help we still need this money to go in the right places and to build these housing and to help get homeless people off the street. We still need all these things done. And I'm sorry, Adam, I call you Nick. I apologize for that. I meant Adam. We still need all these things done, and we still need to a lot of things lie before us. So the struggle is just beginning. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. because we live in a society that thinks that it's okay. It's okay for poor people to sleep on the street. It's okay for people to be moved out of their communities. It's okay for people to own and to have the money for 1% of the people to own the rest of the people, or to have money in the way that they have it, in unseemly ways, without using and understanding their responsibility to the broader society. And until we get to a point where people understand that people at the bottom, or people who are used in the way that they're being used, must be compensated, and that wealth cannot be totally at the top, that it has to be evenly distributed to others, and that people have a right to live, a right to pursue happiness, and that the way things are going is not the way that they should be. And this is not the best of all possible worlds. This is not the great shining city on the hill while people are laying in the ditch. This is not what it's supposed to be. I mean, so until they get that, which I don't know when they will, we're gonna have to struggle. We're gonna have to be vigilant. So I applaud all of you guys. And I say to Councilwoman Sawant that I pledge to her my support and ongoing support until I can't do it anymore. I start to say until we get to that point, but in this country, the struggle is going to be a long time. I mean, it's going to be a long time because they're so convinced that they're right. They're so convinced that it's okay. I mean, you got a president who will stand and see people dying and see hospital emergency rooms being overcrowded and say, it's going fine. This is the attitude. This is the insincere, almost indecent attitude that this government and that people have in this country toward the poor and toward the struggling and toward the workers even. And this has to change. It's not going to change because they want to. It's going to change because they have to. So my hat's off to you guys. Keep the struggle going.
Thank you so much, Reverend Jeffrey. And of course, the feeling is mutual, and commitment that Reverend Jeffrey has shown in this fight to tax Amazon and so many others is an inspiration. And of course, all of the people watching and the people who have, had the opportunity to participate in this tax Amazon struggle. It's abundantly clear what we're up against when day in, day out, whether it's the thousands of signatures or just the poignant testimony by now hundreds and in fact thousands of people over the last couple years of struggle, just demonstrates really what we're up against, to be able to hear that community outcry, the desperate need for affordable housing, to combat the environmental crisis, to provide basic services for people living on the streets, and of course to combat just the horrific racism which pervades in our city, throughout the country. To just hear that outcry and then time and time again, fight against it in so many ways, as we've noted, by ignoring, by confusing, by systematically trying to prevent any kind of fundamental change. But then, of course, right when we're at the point right now where we're at, on the verge of a final tax Amazon vote, $200+ million per year to build social housing. Now we, of course, have the battle to define who won this victory and how did we win this victory. And so to have Reverend Jeffrey talk about that struggle, to have Reverend Ying, Sharon, it really does help clarify. In fact, nothing helps clarify more than the public comment we're about to hear in about 18 minutes, and what we've heard over the course of this struggle, in the various action conferences and other rallies, protests. Before we go on to our last community speaker, Logan Swan, I just wanted to note that, of course, we are gearing up for a huge victory on this tax Amazon. But as Reverend Jeffrey noted, This is an important step, but it is frankly a small step in the context of the city we're living in, the world, the country, the world we're living in. So I just wanted to note, and I think we're going to have the links posted, as I'm talking. The budget committee, the Seattle City Council Budget Committee, is currently discussing a revised budget because of the coronavirus crisis and the economic impact that's had. This Wednesday, in 2 days at 4 p.m., there's going to be the one public hearing where community gets a chance to weigh in a public hearing setting to City Council about what we need, how we need to address this crisis. We know that Mayor Durkan has already assigned departments to slash their budgets. I believe it's 5 to 10%. And we also know at the same time that all we're getting is double speak and, promises here, but inaction there when it comes to the key demands of the Black Lives Matter, the Justice for George Floyd movement, and in particular, the demand to defund the police by at least 50%. So what we're, what we also want to do, we want to, celebrate this tax Amazon victory, get the word out about how we want it, but also immediately channel this energy into the people's budget so that we can fight for the people's budget demands, which include but don't, we want to have a community discussion, defunding the police by at least 50%, of passing the strongest possible Amazon tax, but then assigning that money to address the gentrification we're seeing in the Central District by building 1,000 permanently affordable homes first. We want millions of dollars to fund the tiny house villages that we know are immediate solutions, not permanent solutions. For that, we want social housing. We want Amazon tax to build, permanent social housing. But in the meantime, we want millions of dollars for tiny house villages. We also want funding for renters' rights to fight the wave of evictions that we know is forthcoming, that everybody, frankly, is talking about, and so many of us are concerned about, as so many people have lost jobs and pay. But the landlords, eventually, the eviction moratoria, the protections are going to wear off, and want to ensure that this people's budget, we fight as hard as we can to make it so working people don't pay the cost, but rather big business, the big banks, the corporate landlords. And we also want to bring other community demands, such as bringing the decommissioned Fire Station 6 and the East Precinct building into permanent community control. So these are some of the demands of our people's budget movement. Of course, we're just in the wake of this tax Amazon movement, shifting focus to that people's budget movement. We really encourage people to join a community watch party just like this to prepare our movement to most effectively advocate for those people's budget demands and other community demands in the context of this budget here, public hearing on the budget. So without further ado, let me introduce the next community speaker for this community watch party. It's Logan Swan, who is a rank and file iron worker, also a member of Socialist Alternative, who's been an active and incredibly powerful force in the tax Amazon movement for since its beginning. And let's hear from Logan about how we can declare this victory, but also make sure that that no shenanigans are pulled before the vote is final. So Logan.
This is definitely our victory. I've been involved in the tax Amazon struggle since 2018. There's been stiff political establishment, big business opposition, and it's our movement that got us here. The hundreds of people who are out getting signatures, that we were able to get the 30,000 signatures needed to get our ballot initiative, in a spot to be put forward in November. Like, that was our work. And the thousands of people who participated in the action conferences where we brought in the community to help, build the campaign and develop what we were putting forward, develop our demands. And it's the threat of taking that ballot to November. That's our leverage for taxing Amazon and big business. There's not a savvy politician, these backroom deals where, you find the right technocratic, means of making big business pay, and all of a sudden they're okay with it, right? The one tax on big business and a different tax on big business would be fundamentally different to the businesses paying it. Is ridiculous. So yeah, and I think there's a long history of this, right? With the FDR and the Wagner Act that was passed, supposedly giving workers the right to unionize, is credited with the mass union drives that built the labor movement into the fighting force that it was able to be historically. And that's just an attempt to completely erase, the tens of thousands of workers who really led in the struggle, from Minneapolis to the West Coast waterfront strike to Toledo, Ohio, and the Flint sit-down strikes in Michigan that built the UAW. This is our history as working people of fighting for the things that we need. And again, we see it, where the credit goes to so-called liberal Supreme Courts, being responsible and getting where the ruling class tries to give the credit for Roe v. Wade, the EPA, OSHA, Title IX, the Equal Rights Amendment, while completely ignoring that, you had, the civil rights and the Black Power movements, radical feminism in the 70s, in the late 60s and 70s, right, a tumultuous period of the organization of working class and oppressed people in the workplaces and in our communities, putting forward demands and fighting for them. This is an attempt to try and rob us of the lessons that we can learn from fighting for the things that we need. And that's, I think, what's really important out of this. And it's no coincidence that they're trying to get ahead of the curve and miseducate us on how it is that we were able to win this tremendous victory. But and the fight isn't over yet, right? In the meeting that we're going to have in 10 minutes, right? We need to be putting forward in no uncertain terms, right, that we will not accept any watering down. We will not accept the sunset clause, and we refuse to have any further delays on this. These same establishment politicians could have acted months ago to guarantee, immediate COVID relief for working class families and a strong tax on big business for green union jobs and permanently affordable publicly owned housing. But they were busy, going through that process of trying to find, a happy middle ground, based on what was acceptable to big business in their eyes. But as we understand it, that the real pressure that caused this to happen was the leverage of our movement, of us in the street getting signatures. And we got to carry this victory forward. If we win today, right, that we have to be prepared, right? We saw the big business push for repeal in 2018, right? We can't entirely rest on our laurels, but also the fight isn't over. What this represents is an opening in the battle of the fight against austerity, right? With like was mentioned, right, with austerity budgeting from resulting from COVID, and this also isn't anything new, where every year when we would have the People's Budget Campaign, fighting for funding for what working people need, while the political establishment was trying to make cuts to women's shelters and homeless services. And now this is more aggressive than ever, I think, than we've ever seen. And so we have to carry this victory forward for a people's budget, right? The demand to defund SPE by at least 50% to fund the social programs that working class families in our city rely on, and also to protect our public sector sisters and brothers who are facing, tremendous cuts and attacks in this budget process. So yeah, I guess I'll plug it again, right? That this struggle continues into Wednesday's public hearing for the tremendous wealth that we create in society to go into the things that we need, instead of what we've seen over the past several decades, right, of just an increasing flow into the pockets of big business and out of our hands. So yeah, I'm really proud of everyone that I've been able to work with on this campaign. This is our victory, full stop. And yeah, we're also going to have to fight to make sure that they don't try and hijack from us and yeah, co-opt the fruits of our labor. So thanks everybody. And I look forward to carrying on the struggle with all of you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Logan, for those words. So now is usually the time where we spend the last 5 or so minutes before going over to the Seattle Channel Council meeting, where we hear from Shama to kind of tie things up a little bit. Unfortunately, Councilmember Sawant has been pulled away to do stuff related to being a council member. So we're going to just take this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen if I can figure out how to do that right now. I'd like to share a screen with some of the exciting pictures. Let's see, with some pictures from just scenes from the movement over the last year, basically, or half a year. So yeah, what you're seeing right here, and I can just go through them a little bit. This is, I believe, the phenomenal launch party to kick off this tax Amazon, the fight to win this legislation, which hopefully is culminating today, where on a snow day, and being from Seattle myself, to get 500 plus people to go anywhere on a snow day, much less in the evening, to fight for something that we may win, we may not, was really, I think, a demonstration, not just, of course, to ourselves in the movement, but it was a real shot across the bow to the establishment, and really seeing that we were serious when so many hundreds, actually thousands of people, made donations or sacrificed to keep our movement city council office, so that Shama could continue inside City Hall in spite of the millions that Amazon and big business threw at our movement to kick us out of City Hall. This was a real clear demonstration that we had no intention of just resting on our laurels, that we were going to use that movement in a way that was going to most effectively build. So now, yes, just part of this tax Amazon movement has, of course, been rallies in Washington Hall, rallies in City Hall, but of course marches on the street. And I believe this was basically the last march we were able to have before we were thrown, as a movement, a tremendous curveball, which, is a testament to how strong and how well organized this movement is, and just how deeply the support was, that, we were able to have this rally and almost immediately get thrown the curveball of, just this horrific crisis, which is, of course, hit working people and communities of color the hardest. But to be able to persist through that was really exciting. And here, of course, the movement is rooted primarily in the collective action, but there's a lot of really awesome activists as part, that form part of this. And in fact, this activist you see here owns a small business in the Central District. We've not been without support from small businesses in this city, just like the Fight for 15, where, big business, of course, never comes out itself into the light of day. You're never going to hear Amazon itself giving public comment. They like to have, other people who are, in reality, negatively impacted by just how vicious neoliberal capitalism is. They like to have them do their bidding. But on our side, we have counted on tremendous support from folks like Shirley Henderson here, the owner of Squirrel Chops in the Central District, who supported taxing Amazon and taxing the rich for a long time. Of course, we've had our fair share of rallies, and including rallies. I believe this is a rally right outside, the Amazon spheres. We, long disagreed with the idea that, if we want to create big change, it's by, building a movement, but don't poke the bear. Don't piss off the powers that be too much. In reality, we need to build a movement, but just to give leverage to the decision makers behind closed doors. And we rejected that and said that, how are we going to defeat a movement against an opposition like Amazon, who's been waging class war now for many years, unless we actually prepare our movement and working people, young people, activists for the tough fight ahead. And so by taking it directly to the Amazon spheres, we were able to show, of course, our movement, but also the establishment, that we weren't afraid of poking the bear, and that if we did and we were organized and we persisted, we could win. And that's what I believe, we all believe we're on the verge of doing today. I'm going to speed up a little bit because we just got a couple of minutes before we go to the city council meeting. But this is a picture of one of the action conferences where hundreds of people came together to democratically decide, in the event that there were inaction in City Hall, that the ballot would be the way the movement would address it. And so hundreds of people participated in several action conferences to determine how much we would wage this fight for. Here we have more exciting pictures of movements in the street outside City Hall. Clearly, if this is anybody but our movement's victory, then they got to show us these kinds of pictures, because you don't work this hard with this many people and have this kind of success without yielding some fruits. And here we are on the verge of winning a big victory. It looks like one of the more complex efforts by the establishment to confuse the movement, to confuse ordinary people, is by saying that they were going to pass something region-wide. This is not just the city, which we of course agree. It's not just a city, it's a region, it's a national, it's a global problem. But their promise to do something on the county level was only going to happen, they said, if we banned the Tax Amazon movement on the city level. We knew that was that was one of those shenanigans that Reverend Jeffrey talked about. We weren't going to do that. We weren't going to accept that, and so we took the fight to Olympia. We continued having our action conferences, and ultimately, as we see here, and I'll just power through these pictures right now. It's 2 o'clock, so let's go ahead and if we can move to the screen to show people where to go to Seattle Channel, and we can prepare to give public comment, and then prepare to celebrate our victory and control the narrative about how we won this and who won this, which is of course our movement. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone.